This is HOA Karma Files. I saved every receipt and every timestamp. I am standing in my driveway on a Tuesday morning, and there is a tow truck backing up to my car. You are going to stop acting like a victim. That is Patricia Cooper, the treasurer of the Fairview Parking Compliance Association, and she is pointing at my sedan like it committed a felony. I moved into this Roswell, Georgia neighborhood 6 days ago. My car sat in the driveway for 1 day without moving because I worked a double shift at the warehouse and slept through the afternoon. Now Patricia is telling the tow driver to hook it up because it is abandoned property. I work warehouse inventory control. I track every item and every timestamp. I know my car was not abandoned. I step forward and pull out my phone to record. Patricia sees the phone and her face goes red. That is harassment. I will have your car towed for filming me on association property. The neighbor across the street, a guy in a Braves cap, is also filming from his front porch. Patricia screams that filming is harassment, and she will tow my car for that too. The tow driver looks uncomfortable and puts his hand on the wheel lift lever, but does not pull it yet. I keep my phone steady. I tell Patricia I never got a violation notice. She pulls a folded packet from her jacket pocket and waves it at me. The pages flap in the breeze, but I cannot read the text on them. She says the notice was posted yesterday at 11 in the morning on my windshield, and I had 24 hours to move the vehicle or face impound. I check my windshield. There is no notice. I check the driveway. Nothing. Patricia taps the portable radio earpiece she is wearing and glares at me like I am lying. She says the notice is right there, and if I removed it, that is tampering with official correspondence. I tell her there was never a notice. The tow driver shifts his weight and looks at Patricia, then at me, then back at Patricia. The neighbor across the street, the one filming, shouts that he has been home all morning and no one put anything on my windshield. Patricia spins around and screams at him to mind his own business or she will fine him for interference. He does not lower his phone. I step closer to the tow truck and read the company name on the door. I recognize it from the HOA documents I got when I signed the lease. Patricia says the HOA has a zero-tolerance policy on abandoned vehicles. I ask what counts as abandoned. She says any vehicle that does not move for 24 hours. I ask where that rule is written. She taps her earpiece again and says it is in the Parking Addendum, Section 4, Subsection B. I ask to see a copy. She says I should have read it before I moved in. I tell her I did read it and there is no 24-hour rule. The rule is 72 hours. She stops. Her mouth tightens. She says the board updated the rules last month and I am responsible for knowing current policy. I ask when the update was posted. She does not answer. The tow driver picks up his phone and makes a call. Patricia snaps at him to get off the phone and finish the job. He ignores her and talks quietly into his phone for a few seconds, then hangs up and tells Patricia he needs written authorization before he hooks the vehicle. Patricia pulls a laminated card from her pocket and flashes it at the driver like it is a badge. She says she is authorized to issue immediate tow orders under the Emergency Compliance Clause. The driver squints at the card and shakes his head. He says his dispatcher needs a signed form with a violation code and a timestamp. Patricia's face goes even redder. She says she will call the management company and have him fired if he does not hook the car right now. The driver climbs back into his truck. Patricia screams at him. He starts the engine and pulls forward, wheel lift still raised, and drives off down the street. Patricia turns to me and says this is not over. She jabs a finger at my chest and says I will be receiving a formal notice today, and if the car is not moved by tomorrow morning she will have it impounded, and I will owe the association for storage fees, towing fees, administrative fees, and a fine for non-compliance. I ask how she can fine me for non-compliance when I complied with the 72-hour rule. She says the rule is 24 hours now, and ignorance is not an excuse. She taps her earpiece one more time, turns, and walks across the street to a white SUV. She gets in and sits there staring at me through the windshield for a full minute before she drives off. The neighbor in the Braves cap walks over. His name is Marcus, and he lives 2 doors down. He says Patricia has been pulling this for months, targeting anyone who does not kiss the ring. He says she invented a new towing policy without a vote and started using it to rack up fees. He says the HOA management company gets a cut of every tow and they look the other way. I ask if anyone has fought it. He says one guy tried and Patricia buried him in fines until he moved out. He says he has been recording every interaction because he knows his turn is coming. I thank him and go inside. I pull up the HOA documents on my laptop. The parking addendum says 72 hours. There is no update posted on the resident portal. I check my email. Nothing. I check my mailbox. Nothing. I take a photo of the empty windshield with a timestamp. I save Marcus's number. 2 hours later, there is a knock on my door. It is a guy in a polo shirt with a clipboard. He says he is from the management company and he is delivering a violation notice. He hands me an envelope. I open it. The notice is dated yesterday and says my vehicle was marked as abandoned at 11 a.m. And I have until tomorrow at 11 a.m. to move it or face towing and fees. I show the guy the timestamp on my phone photo. I tell him there was no notice on my windshield this morning. He shrugs and says he is just the messenger. He walks back to a sedan with the management company logo on the door and drives off. I call the management company. The receptionist transfers me to a compliance officer named Derek. I explain the situation. Derek says the notice was posted per policy, and if I missed it, that is my responsibility. I ask about the 24-hour rule. He says the board updated the policy and it is in effect as of last month. I ask where the update is posted. He says it was emailed to all residents. I check my email again. Nothing. I ask him to forward me the email. He says he will look into it and call me back. He does not call me back. I check the HOA bylaws. Any rule change requires a board vote and 30 days notice. I search the resident portal for meeting minutes. The last posted meeting was 3 months ago. I email the board and ask for the minutes from last month's meeting. No response. The next morning, I move my car to the street in front of my house. Patricia drives by 10 minutes later in her white SUV, slows down, and stares. She keeps driving. I go to work. When I come home that night, there is a bright orange sticker on my driver's side window. The sticker has no readable text, but it is shaped like a violation warning. I peel it off and go inside. Another envelope is taped to my door. This one says my car is parked in a restricted zone and I have 24 hours to move it, or face towing. I read the parking map in the HOA documents. The street in front of my house is not restricted. I take photos of the car, the street, the curb paint, and the sticker residue on my window. I text the photos to Marcus. He texts back immediately and says Patricia did the same thing to him last year, except she claimed his guest was parked in a fire lane when there was no fire lane. I call Derek again. Voicemail. I leave a message with my address and the violation code from the notice. I wait 2 days. No callback. I email the board again. No response. I check the resident portal and see a new post from Patricia. It says, effective immediately. All street parking requires a visible guest pass, and any vehicle without a pass will be towed. The post is dated today. I have no guest pass. I have no idea how to get one. I drive to the management company office. It is in a strip mall 20 minutes away. The receptionist tells me guest passes are issued by the HOA board and I need to attend the next meeting to request one. I ask when the next meeting is. She checks a binder and says it is not scheduled yet. I ask how I am supposed to get a pass if there is no meeting. She says I can email the board. I tell her I already did. She shrugs. I ask to speak to Derek. She says he is out of the office. I ask when he will be back. She says she does not know. I leave my name and number again. On my way out, I see a corkboard with flyers and notices. One of them is a contract summary for a towing vendor. The vendor name matches the truck that showed up at my house. The contract says the vendor gets $200 per tow plus storage fees, and the HOA gets a 20% kickback. I take a photo of the flyer with my phone. The receptionist does not notice. I go home. There is another notice on my door. This one says I failed to comply with the guest pass requirement and my vehicle is subject to immediate impound. I check the timestamp on the notice. It is dated 30 minutes ago. I look at my car. It is still parked in front of my house. No pass, but also no tow truck. I text Marcus. He says the board uses the notices to build a paper trail and then hits you with a lump sum bill at the end of the month. He says Patricia loves to stack violations and add late fees for each one. He says his advice is to get a lawyer before it gets worse. I do not have lawyer money. I work inventory control, and I just moved in. I cannot afford to lose this place or get dragged into court. I start recording everything. I set up a cheap security camera on my porch aimed at the driveway and the street. I keep my phone charged and ready. I document every notice, every sticker, every interaction. I timestamp everything. 3 days later, the tow truck comes back. This time it is 6 in the morning and I am asleep. I wake up to the sound of the wheel lift engaging. I run outside in my hoodie and sweatpants. The driver is hooking my car. I shout at him to stop. He ignores me. I pull out my phone and start recording. He looks up and sees the camera, then keeps working. I ask him for the authorization. He points to a clipboard on the passenger seat of the truck. I step closer and try to read it, but he pulls the clipboard away and says I cannot touch company property. Patricia pulls up in her SUV. She parks behind the tow truck and gets out. She is wearing her black jacket and her pink sun hat even though it is barely dawn. She walks up and tells the driver to finish. I tell her I moved my car back to the driveway yesterday. She says it does not matter. The violation is already logged. I ask to see the log. She says it is internal documentation and I do not have access. The driver finishes hooking the car. I step in front of the truck. I tell him he cannot take my car without proper authorization. Patricia pulls her phone out and dials. She says she is calling the police to report me for obstruction. I do not move. The driver sits in the cab and waits. Patricia talks into her phone, loud enough for me to hear. She says there is a hostile resident blocking a legal tow and she needs an officer to respond immediately. Marcus comes jogging down the street in a t-shirt and shorts. He has his phone out and he is recording. Patricia sees him and screams that he is trespassing on association property. He stops at the curb, still recording, and says the street is public property. Patricia yells at him to leave or she will have him fined. He does not move. A police cruiser pulls up 5 minutes later. The officer gets out and asks what is going on. Patricia launches into a speech about HOA policy and abandoned vehicles and hostile residents. She waves her laminated card at the officer. He takes it, looks at it, and hands it back. He asks me for my side. I show him the security camera footage on my phone. The footage shows my car parked in the driveway yesterday afternoon, then moved to the street last night, then moved back to the driveway late last night. I show him the notices with conflicting dates and violation codes. I show him the photo of the contract flyer with the kickback clause. The officer looks at Patricia. He asks if the HOA has a signed authorization for this specific tow. Patricia says yes and pulls a folded paper from her jacket. The officer takes it and reads it. He asks her when it was signed. She says this morning. He points to the timestamp on the paper. It says 5:45 a.m. He asks her how she got the authorization signed before 6 a.m. when the management company office does not open until 9. Patricia's face goes tight. She says the board president pre-signed a stack of authorizations for emergency use. The officer hands the paper back. He tells the driver to unhook the car. The driver looks at Patricia. She tells him to ignore the officer and finish the job. The officer steps closer to the driver and repeats the instruction. The driver unhooks the car. Patricia screams that this is interference with lawful business, and she will file a complaint with the department. The officer writes something in his notepad and hands Patricia a card. He tells her if she wants to pursue the tow she needs to go through proper channels and get a valid court order. He tells me to keep my footage and document everything. Patricia gets in her SUV and slams the door. She sits there for a minute, engine running, staring at me. Then she drives off. The tow truck follows. The officer tells me to call him if she shows up again without proper authorization. He gives me his card and leaves. Marcus walks over and says that is the first time he has seen anyone shut her down. He says I need to take this to the board before she escalates further. I go inside and review the footage. My hands are shaking. I upload everything to a cloud folder and make backups. I email Derek again with the police report number and the officer's name. Still no response. I check the resident portal. Patricia has posted a new notice. It says the board is implementing an emergency vehicle identification requirement, and all residents must display a numbered decal on their windshield by the end of the week or face towing. The decals cost $75. I do not have $75 to spare. I email the board and ask how to request a financial waiver. No response. I text Marcus. He says the decal rule is brand new and she is making it up as she goes. He says he is not paying for a decal, and he is ready to fight it at the next meeting. I ask when the next meeting is. He says Patricia keeps canceling them. I call Derek's direct line. Voicemail. I leave a message saying I need an emergency meeting with the board to address the towing harassment and the backdated notices. I say I have video evidence and a police report. I hang up and wait. 2 days later, I get a call from a woman who says she is the regional supervisor for the management company. Her name is Linda. She says she received my complaint and she is reviewing the file. I ask if she has seen the footage. She says not yet, but she will look at it today. I ask if she can stop Patricia from issuing more violations while the review is ongoing. She says she cannot interfere with board decisions, but she will expedite the review. She says she will call me back within 48 hours. 48 hours pass. No call. I call Linda's number. Voicemail. I leave another message. I check my car. Another sticker, this time on the rear window. I peel it off and add the photo to my folder. That night, I get a text from an unknown number. The message says I need to stop harassing the board or there will be consequences. I screenshot the text and add it to my folder. I text Marcus. He says he got the same message last month. The next morning, there is a notice on my door that says I owe the HOA $850 in fines, towing fees, administrative fees, and late fees. The breakdown lists 4 separate violations, 2 failed tow attempts, and a processing fee for each notice. I stare at the numbers. None of this adds up. I never got towed. The notices conflict with each other. The fees are made up. I stared at the violation letter and smiled, because it proved exactly what I suspected. I pull up my security footage and cross-reference every timestamp on the notices. The first notice claimed my car was marked abandoned at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. My footage shows my car in the driveway that entire day, and I did not leave for work until 6 p.m. The second notice claimed I parked in a restricted zone on Thursday. My footage shows my car on the street in front of my house, and the curb paint is white, not red. The third notice claimed I failed to display a guest pass on Saturday. My footage shows my car back in the driveway, which does not require a guest pass. Every single notice is contradicted by the footage. Every timestamp is wrong. Every claim is false. I call Linda and leave a message with the new bill amount and a summary of the discrepancies. I say I have proof that the notices were backdated and the violations never happened. I say I need an emergency stop on the fines before they try to put a lien on the property. My attorney told me if I want an emergency stop, I need 1 document today, and Patricia is stalling on purpose. I do not hear back from Linda. I call Derek. Voicemail. I call the main management company line. The receptionist says both Derek and Linda are in a meeting and cannot be disturbed. I ask when they will be available. She says she does not know. I hang up. I drive to the management company office again. This time I bring a printed packet with the footage screenshots, the notices, the police report, and the contract flyer. The receptionist sees me walk in and immediately picks up the phone. She talks quietly for a few seconds, then hangs up and tells me Derek will be out in a minute. Derek comes out 10 minutes later. He is a thin guy in his 40s with a tired expression. He takes my packet and flips through it without reading closely. He says he will add it to the file. I ask when the review will be complete. He says these things take time. I ask how much time. He says a few weeks. I tell him I cannot wait a few weeks. The bill says I have 10 days to pay, or they will start lien proceedings. He looks at the bill and winces. He says he will talk to Linda and see if they can pause collections. He says he will call me by the end of the week. He does not call me by the end of the week. I check my mail and find a new envelope. This one is from a law firm. It says the HOA has retained counsel to pursue unpaid fines, and I have 5 days to pay in full or face a lawsuit. The total is now $975 because they added legal fees. I sit on my couch and stare at the letter. I do not have $975. I barely have rent. I work a decent job, but I just moved and I am stretched thin. If they put a lien on the property, my landlord will evict me. If they sue, I will have to hire a lawyer I cannot afford. This is exactly what they want. They are betting I will fold and pay just to make it stop. I text Marcus and tell him about the lawyer letter. He calls me immediately. He says this is the escalation point, the moment where Patricia thinks she has won. He says she does this to everyone. She stacks violations until the bill is scary, then brings in a lawyer to make it feel official. He says most people pay because they do not know the violations are fake. He says the few who fight usually give up when the legal fees start piling on. I ask him what I should do. He says go to the next board meeting and make it public. He says shine a light on the whole operation and force the board to choose between backing Patricia or cutting her loose. He says the board president is a retired guy named Tom who does not like conflict and usually sides with whoever is louder. But if enough people show up and demand answers, Tom will fold. I ask when the next meeting is. Marcus says there is not one scheduled, but the bylaws say residents can call a special meeting if they get 10 signatures. He says he already has 8. He says if I sign, we can force a meeting within 2 weeks. I sign. Marcus circulates the petition. Within 3 days, he has 12 signatures. He emails the board and the management company with the petition and a formal request for a special meeting. The bylaws say the board has to respond within 5 business days. 4 days later, Derek calls. He says the board has scheduled a special meeting for next Tuesday at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. He says the agenda will include a review of recent compliance actions and a discussion of the towing policy. He says I am welcome to attend and present my concerns during the open comment period. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA nightmares. I prepare. I print new copies of the footage screenshots with highlighted timestamps. I print the notices with the discrepancies circled. I print the contract flyer with the kickback clause highlighted. I print the police report. I print the lawyer letter. I organize everything into a binder with tabs. Marcus does the same. Tuesday comes. I get to the clubhouse at 6:30. It is a small room with a folding table at the front and rows of plastic chairs. There are already 15 people in the room. Marcus is near the front with his binder. I sit next to him. More people trickle in. By 7, there are 30 people packed into a space meant for 20. Tom, the board president, sits at the table with 2 other board members. Patricia sits at the far end of the table in her black jacket and pink sun hat, arms crossed. She is tapping her portable radio earpiece and glaring at the crowd. Tom clears his throat and calls the meeting to order. He says the purpose of the meeting is to address resident concerns about recent compliance actions. He says the board takes all concerns seriously and is committed to fair enforcement. He says each resident will have 3 minutes to speak during the open comment period. Patricia leans over and whispers something to Tom. He nods and adds that the board reserves the right to cut off any speaker who becomes hostile or disruptive. The first speaker is a woman in her 60s who says she got a violation for parking her car in her own driveway because it was not centered between the lines. She says the lines are painted wrong, and she has photos to prove it. Patricia interrupts and says the lines are correct per the site plan, and the resident is responsible for compliance regardless of paint accuracy. The woman tries to respond, but Tom says her 3 minutes are up. The second speaker is a guy in his 30s who says he got fined for having a guest park on the street without a pass, even though the guest was only there for 20 minutes. Patricia interrupts again and says the rule is 0 tolerance and there are no exceptions. The guy says he was never told about the pass requirement. Patricia says ignorance is not an excuse. Tom moves on to the next speaker. Marcus stands. He says he has been a resident for 5 years and he has watched the compliance actions escalate from reasonable enforcement to targeted harassment. He says the board has been issuing violations without proper notice, backdating paperwork, and using a tow vendor with a financial conflict of interest. Patricia interrupts and says the board has followed all procedures and any claim otherwise is defamatory. Marcus ignores her and keeps talking. He says he has video evidence of violations being issued for non-existent infractions, and he is prepared to share it with the entire room. Tom says the board cannot review video during the meeting, and Marcus needs to submit it in writing. Marcus says he already submitted it and got no response. Tom says the board is still reviewing the submission. Patricia leans forward and says if Marcus continues to spread false accusations, she will pursue legal action. Marcus smiles and says make it public. He loves watching people get embarrassed. The room goes quiet. Patricia's face turns red. Tom stammers and says we need to keep this civil. Marcus sits down. It is my turn. I stand and introduce myself. I say I moved in 3 weeks ago, and since then I have received 7 violation notices, 2 tow attempts, and a legal threat for over $900 in fines. I say none of the violations are legitimate, and I have proof. I open my binder and hold up the first page. It is a screenshot of my car in the driveway with a timestamp. I explain that the notice claimed my car was abandoned at 11 a.m. on that date, but the footage shows it was parked legally and I was home. Patricia interrupts and says the footage is not authenticated and could be edited. I ignore her and flip to the next page. I show the second notice and the matching footage, then the third, then the fourth. Every single notice contradicts the footage. Every timestamp is wrong. I show the police report. I explain that the officer told the tow driver to unhook my car because the authorization was invalid. Patricia interrupts again and says the officer was misinformed and the HOA has the right to enforce its own policies. I flip to the contract flyer. I explain that the tow vendor gets $200 per tow plus a 20% kickback to the HOA. I say this creates a financial incentive to maximize tows regardless of legitimacy. Tom looks uncomfortable. One of the other board members, a woman in her 50s, leans over and whispers to him. Patricia stands up and says the contract is standard industry practice, and I am misrepresenting the facts. I ask her if she personally authorized any of the tow attempts. She says yes. I ask her if she verified the violations before authorizing the tows. She says the violations were logged per policy. I ask her who logged them. She says she did. I let that sit for a second. Then I ask her how she logged a violation for a car that was not in the location she claimed. She says the location was verified by a site visit. I ask her when the site visit happened. She says the day of the violation. I ask her what time. She hesitates. She says she does not recall the exact time. I hold up my phone and pull up the security footage. I play the clip. It shows my driveway empty at 11 a.m. My car pulls in at 6:30 p.m. Patricia says the footage is doctored. I ask her if she is calling the police officer a liar since he reviewed the same footage. She does not answer. The room is silent. Tom clears his throat and says the board will review the evidence and issue a response within 30 days. I say I do not have 30 days. The lawyer letter says I have 5 days to pay or face a lawsuit. Tom says he will instruct the attorney to pause proceedings pending the review. Patricia shakes her head and says the attorney is acting on behalf of the association and the board cannot interfere. Tom looks at her. She stares back. One of the other board members, a younger guy in a polo shirt, raises his hand and says he was not aware of the lawyer letter and he would like to see a copy. I hand him one. He reads it and frowns. He asks Patricia if she authorized the legal action. She says yes. He asks if the board voted on it. She says it was an emergency action under her authority as treasurer. He says the bylaws require a board vote for any legal expenditure over $500. Patricia says the fees were under $500 when she authorized it. He points to the line item that says legal fees, $250. He says that puts the total over the threshold. Patricia says the calculation is correct per the fee schedule. He asks to see the fee schedule. She does not produce one. Tom says this is getting off track and we need to move on to the next speaker. The younger board member says he wants this resolved before we move on. The woman board member agrees. Patricia sits back down and crosses her arms. Tom sighs and says the board will convene an emergency executive session after the meeting to discuss the matter. Marcus stands up and says executive sessions are for confidential issues, and this is a public compliance matter. Tom says the board needs to discuss legal strategy. Marcus says if the board is discussing legal strategy against a resident, that resident has the right to be present. Tom does not respond. The meeting drags on for another hour. More residents speak. Every single one has a similar story: bogus violations, backdated notices, tow threats, escalating fees. Patricia interrupts every speaker and denies every claim. Tom looks more and more exhausted. By the end, he says the board will conduct a full review of the compliance program and report back at the next regular meeting. He does not say when the next regular meeting will be. People file out. Marcus and I stay behind. Patricia packs up her papers and walks past us without looking. Tom and the other two board members huddle near the door. The younger guy, whose name is Jason, walks over to us. He says he did not know about most of this, and he is going to push for an independent audit of the compliance actions. He says Patricia has been running the program without board oversight, and he thinks she is abusing her authority. He gives me his email and tells me to send him everything I showed tonight. I go home and forward Jason the entire cloud folder. He replies within an hour and says this is worse than he thought. He says he is going to bring it to Tom and demand an emergency vote to suspend Patricia's compliance authority pending the audit. He says he cannot promise anything, but he will try. The next day, I get a call from Linda, the regional supervisor. She says she reviewed my complaint and the footage, and she agrees that the violations were improperly issued. She says the management company is going to void the fines and issue a formal apology. I ask about the lawyer letter. She says the attorney was hired without management company approval, and the board will be instructed to terminate the engagement. She says she is also going to recommend that the board suspend the tow vendor contract pending a review of the authorization procedures. I ask why this took so long. She says Patricia blocked her access to the file and told Derek not to respond to my calls. She says she only found out about the scope of the problem when Jason forwarded her my evidence last night. She says she is taking over the compliance program directly until the board can implement proper oversight. I hang up and sit on my couch. My hands are shaking again, but this time it is relief. Marcus texts me and says he heard Linda is cleaning house. He says Jason called him and said the board is voting tonight to strip Patricia of her compliance authority and require board approval for all future violations. He says it is not over yet, but it is a start. The next morning, I check the resident portal. There is a new post from Tom. It says the board has voted to suspend the emergency compliance procedures and require written board approval for any towing action. It says all pending fines issued under the old procedures are under review, and residents will be notified of any adjustments within 2 weeks. It says Patricia Cooper has resigned her position as treasurer effective immediately. I screenshot the post and send it to Marcus. He replies with a thumbs up emoji. I forward it to the police officer who responded to the first tow attempt. He replies and says good work. 2 days later, I get a formal letter from the management company. It says all fines and fees related to my account have been voided, and the association apologizes for the error. It says the tow vendor contract has been suspended, and the board is soliciting bids for a new vendor with stricter authorization requirements. It says if I incurred any costs related to the dispute, I can submit a claim for reimbursement. I did not incur costs beyond my time, but I appreciate the letter. I file it in my binder just in case. A week later, Marcus invites me to a neighborhood barbecue. 20 people show up. Everyone is talking about Patricia's resignation. The consensus is that she overplayed her hand and got caught. Someone says she is threatening to sue the board for defamation. Someone else says the board is threatening to sue her for misuse of funds. No one knows what will actually happen, but everyone agrees the towing nightmare is over for now. Jason shows up at the barbecue with a cooler of drinks. He pulls me aside and says the audit found that Patricia issued over 100 violations in the past 6 months, and more than half were improper. He says the management company is refunding thousands of dollars in fines. He says the board is also voting next week to change the parking policy back to the 72-hour rule and eliminate the guest pass requirement. He says they are adding a resident appeal process so no one person can unilaterally issue fines. I thank him. He says I did the work, he just opened the door. I tell him Marcus did most of the legwork. He says Marcus has been fighting this for a year and no one listened until I showed up with footage. He says sometimes it takes a fresh set of eyes to break the pattern. The next board meeting is packed again. Tom opens by announcing the policy changes Jason mentioned. He says the board is committed to transparent enforcement and resident rights. He says the new vendor contract includes a requirement that all tow authorizations be signed by 2 board members and submitted to the management company for verification before the tow is executed. He says the board is also implementing a monthly compliance report that will be posted on the resident portal so everyone can see what violations are being issued and why. Patricia is not at the meeting. Someone asks where she is. Tom says she is no longer involved with the association. Someone else asks if she will face consequences for the improper fines. Tom says the board is reviewing the matter with legal counsel and cannot comment further. The room grumbles, but no one pushes it. After the meeting, I walk out with Marcus. He says this is the best outcome we could have hoped for. He says Patricia is done, the policy is fixed, and the board is actually listening. He says it is not perfect, but it is a hell of a lot better than it was a month ago. I agree. I also know this is not over. Patricia still lives in the neighborhood. She still has allies. The board is still weak and reactive. The management company is still profit-driven. The tow vendor might be gone, but there will be another one. The rules might be better, but rules only work if people follow them. But for now, I can park my car without fear. I can sleep without waiting for the sound of a wheel lift. I can walk to my mailbox without finding another bogus notice. That is enough. A month later, I am pulling into my driveway after work, and I see a tow truck parked across the street. My stomach drops. Then, I see the truck is hooking a car that actually is abandoned. A rusted sedan with flat tires and expired tags that has been sitting in a guest spot for 3 months. The driver waves at me. I wave back and go inside. Marcus texts me that night and says the new vendor is doing it right. Actual violations only, proper notices, board authorization on file. He says it is weird seeing the system work the way it is supposed to. I reply that it is a nice change. 3 months later, I am at another board meeting. This one is routine. Budget review and landscaping bids. Jason is now treasurer. He presents a financial report that shows the association lost $15,000 in refunded fines and legal fees related to the Patricia mess. He says the board is implementing new financial controls to prevent future abuse. The room votes to approve the controls unanimously. Tom announces that the next election is in 6 months, and he is not running for re-election. He says he is tired, and he thinks the board needs new energy. Jason says he is running for president. Marcus raises his hand and says he is running for a board seat. I do not raise my hand, but I make a note to vote. After the meeting, I run into the neighbor who filmed the first confrontation, the guy in the Braves cap. He tells me his name is Colin, and he just wanted to say thanks for standing up to Patricia. He says he was planning to move because he could not deal with the harassment, but now he is staying. He says the neighborhood feels different, like people are not afraid anymore. I tell him it was not just me, it was everyone who showed up and demanded better. He shakes my hand and walks off. I sit in my car for a minute before driving home. I think about the timeline. 3 months ago, I was standing in my driveway at dawn, phone out, trying to stop a tow truck from hooking my car while Patricia screamed about harassment. Now I am sitting in a parking lot after a boring budget meeting, and that feels like a victory. The HOA is still an HOA. There will be more fights. There will be more ridiculous rules and petty disputes and people who abuse whatever power they have. But this fight is over, and we won. I drive home. My car is parked in the driveway. No sticker, no notice, no threat. I go inside and eat dinner. I check the resident portal. There is a new post from Jason. It says the board has voted to eliminate the compliance officer position entirely and transition to a complaint-based system where residents report actual violations instead of the board hunting for them. It says the change will take effect next month. Marcus texts me the link with 3 fire emojis. I reply with a thumbs up. That night, I back up all my footage and documents to a new external drive. I label it HOA evidence and put it on a shelf. I do not think I will need it again, but I am not taking chances. A week later, I am walking to my car and I see Patricia across the street, loading boxes into her SUV. She sees me and freezes. We stare at each other for a few seconds. She gets in her SUV and drives off. I hear from Marcus later that she is moving out of the neighborhood. He says she sold her house and is relocating to another state. He says good riddance. I do not celebrate. I just feel tired. The whole thing was exhausting, and even though we won, it cost time and stress and energy that I will never get back. But it was worth it, because now the next person who moves in will not have to deal with what I dealt with. Jason is elected president in the next election. Marcus wins a board seat. The new board votes to adopt a formal resident bill of rights that includes due process protections, transparent enforcement, and an independent appeals process. They also vote to post all board meeting minutes and financial reports on the resident portal within a week of each meeting. The neighborhood is not perfect. People still complain about noise and trash and parking. But the complaints are normal now, not weaponized. The board responds to actual problems instead of inventing them. The tow truck only shows up when someone actually violates a rule, and even then, the driver checks the authorization twice before hooking anything. I run into Linda, the regional supervisor, at a coffee shop a few months later. She recognizes me and asks how things are going. I tell her the neighborhood is stable. She says she is glad. She says the Patricia situation was a wake-up call for the management company, and they have implemented new training and oversight for all their HOA accounts. She says they are also auditing all compliance actions from the past year across their entire portfolio to identify similar patterns. She says they found 3 other associations with the same problem, and they are cleaning them up. I thank her. She says it is her job. I tell her she is good at it. She smiles and says she tries. 6 months later, I am sitting on my porch with a beer, watching the sunset. Marcus walks over with his dog and sits down. We talk about nothing for a while, just neighborhood gossip and work and the weather. Then he says he got a message from Patricia. She wants to know if the board will drop the lawsuit if she agrees to never contact anyone in the neighborhood again. I ask what lawsuit. Marcus says the board voted to sue her for misuse of funds after the audit found she had been pocketing a portion of the kickback from the tow vendor. He says the management company found emails where she negotiated a side deal with the vendor to inflate the fees and split the extra. He says it is fraud, and the board has no choice but to pursue it. I ask how much she took. Marcus says around $20,000 over 2 years. I whistle. He says the board offered to settle if she pays it back and signs a non-disclosure agreement, but she refused. Now it is going to court. I do not feel bad for her. She built a system to extort people and got caught. The fact that she was also stealing makes it worse. I hope the court throws the book at her. Marcus says the trial is set for next year. He says he will keep me posted. I tell him I appreciate it, but I am done thinking about Patricia. He laughs and says fair enough. A year later, I am still in the same house. The HOA is boring. The board meets once a month and handles routine business. Jason is a competent president who listens to residents and does not abuse his authority. Marcus is an active board member who keeps everyone honest. The neighborhood is quiet and functional. I get a text from Marcus one afternoon. It says the court ruled in favor of the HOA and ordered Patricia to pay back the stolen money plus interest and legal fees. It says she filed for bankruptcy and the HOA will probably only recover a fraction of it, but the judgment is on record and she cannot discharge it. It says she is also banned from serving on any HOA board in the state for 10 years. I reply that justice is slow, but it works. Marcus replies that it only works if you fight. He is right. None of this would have happened if I had just paid the fake fines and moved on. None of it would have happened if Marcus had not been recording everything for a year. None of it would have happened if Jason had not pushed for an audit. None of it would have happened if the other residents had not shown up to the meeting and demanded answers. The system is broken by default. It only works when people force it to work. I think about the neighbor who was planning to move, Colin. I think about the woman who got fined for parking in her own driveway. I think about the guy who got fined for a 20-minute guest visit. I think about everyone who paid the fake fines because they did not know they were fake. Patricia hurt a lot of people. She got away with it for years. The only reason she got caught is because she got greedy and targeted someone who had the tools to fight back. I work inventory control. I track timestamps. I know how to document discrepancies. I know how to build a case. Not everyone has those skills. Not everyone has the time or energy or resources to fight. That is what makes HOA abuse so insidious. It preys on people who are already stretched thin. It bets on exhaustion and fear. It hides behind official-sounding language and fake authority. It works because most people do not know their rights and do not have the bandwidth to learn. But once you learn, you cannot unlearn. Once you see the pattern, you see it everywhere. Once you fight back and win, you know it is possible. I sit on my porch and finish my beer. The neighborhood is quiet. My car is in the driveway. There is no sticker on the window. There is no notice on the door. There is no tow truck idling at the curb. It is boring. It is normal. It is exactly what it should be. And that is the happy ending. Thanks for watching.